Hey, welcome back to my channel. I am the Spell Singer, and this is my ongoing review of the Sorcery series of game books. And this review is going to give you a quick look at this title with its book number. I'll read the blurb, go through the plot with the locations, and then talk about some of the game mechanics and the adventure sheet. We'll look at the artwork, have a little chat about that while I run it through the video, and then talk about some of my own likes and dislikes, fun facts, any errors, a summary with a score, and finish on a shout out. But before I do that, I just want to say a thank you to 5 random recent subscribers, just to show a bit of appreciation. So those are Steve Barrett, Junior Harnett, Greg Lidicote, Email, and David Velasco. Now, some of you might recognize that name, David Velasco, and that's going to be my shout out later on. Quite an exciting time for him and his partner in crime, Rick Soul. They're working on this epic, well, as of the 3rd of February, they just released it actually, this epic game book. But I'll go into that a bit later. So for now, this is the 3rd Sorcery book. This is the Seven Serpents. And of course it was written by Steve Jackson, and it was illustrated by John Blanche. So John Blanche is still on board. He also did the cover for this book as well, and this one was published in 1984. So that was a little bit about this book. So nothing's really changed. Author, illustrator are all the same. This makes sense. So it's good for consistency. But the blurb for this book reads as: before you can reach the Archmage Fortress of Mampang, you must cast spells, swerve the most dangerous of traps, destroy the fearsome beasts racing to beat you there, leaving your path clear to the crown of kings. That's it. That's a short and sweet blurb, but it kind of tells you a bit about what to expect from this book. But let's talk about the covers for this book. Now, the original cover of the book was designed and illustrated, like I said, by John Blanche. Now, when the book was republished by Wizard, the cover was reworked by Mel Grant, and then the cover was then redone again by Robert M. Ball, and that was when that Scholastic took over the series. So, 1984, we had the wraparound cover with the book number, which you can see there displayed in the top right is that kind of triangle with that book number. So that was 1984. And then in 1985, we had the red banner. It's quite a popular one, actually. Seems to be on eBay at least. So there seems to be a lot of copies of that. And then 1987 gave us the dragon banner here. And then in 2003, that was when Wizard kind of took over, and then they gave us this cover here, so depicting the Seven Serpents. And then finally, that was followed up in Scholastic for 2022, I think it is, with this final cover, which is obviously the one that I've got. Because like I said before, I never really got into these back in the day. I only discovered them much later. So those are your covers. Now, the plot and the locations for this 3rd Sorcery book. So upon completion of Carre City Port of Traps, book 2, you kind of find yourself at the beginning of the Backlands. Now, you kind of realise quite quickly that it's a bleak kind of landscape, kind of a wasteland almost, and you have to cross it in order to reach Mampang Fortress, which of course is the goal. Now, while travelling, you've got to locate these 7 serpents, which are speeding ahead of you. And they're messengers, essentially, for the Archmage. And they're travelling to Mampang to warn him, of your intentions. The degree of success achieved by you in this will have an obvious direct impact on how you progress through book 4, the final book. And this is the most linear entry in the series, potentially, but is also the most challenging by far. So you've got to obviously defeat these 7 serpents. You've got to catch them and defeat them so as quickly as possible, although you don't have to do that to win the book, but it will be in your interest to do so. So you enter the Backlands, you advance through the desolate wastelands to Mampang, but the 7 serpents have caught wind of your search for this crown of kings. And while on their way to tell the Archmage of your quest, you basically follow and discover the serpent weaknesses to successfully defeat them. Now, in terms of location for this book, we're still in Titan. So you can see from the map here, we got Titan, and you've got Alancia, the Old World, and Cool. And we're in the continent of the Old World, so if we zoom in there, you can see Kakabad. But we've also got Blanche's map. So if we go in even further, you can see where we began in Analand for the Shaman Tanti Hills, and we went across those hills to Kare, Book 2. But now the backlands to the forest of Sanata and across Lake Ilklala. So that's where we're going in this third book. So, game mechanics and adventure sheet. Now, as before, the introductory rules, they kind of offer you a simple game, where there's no magic used. You play as that warrior, and the fights are kind of like a standard fighting fantasy combat. Or you can play that advanced game where you choose the wizard, and you rely on your magic. And if you choose the wizard, you still have a series of magic spells that can be used, each costing between 1 and 4 stamina points. So have a look at this video. The wizard obviously plays differently. You should not really get involved in too much combat, bar the easiest fights, and there are 48 spells that you need to memorize and use correctly to defeat your foes efficiently and survive, as a wizard player. So a tricky point is that some of the spells require physical items to be cast successfully. So kind of get used to seeing paragraphs that say, do you have the Gale Horn required to cast the spell? Or there's no such spell as this, followed by a stamina penalty. So it's nice to have all the spells at your at hand. And of course you can't take the book with you, so you've got to learn as many of these as you can. You may also get some help from Libra, just as in the previous books. You can rely on Libra to get you out of a dodgy situation. So you can only do it once per adventure, so once per book, and may not be called upon again until the events of Crown of Kings, that final book. Now, in calling on her, you may ask for the same 3. It's revitalization, where you get your skill, stamina, and luck levels put back to their initial. Escape, which allows you to get out of a situation when it offers you the chance, or removal of curses and diseases, which can take place at pretty much any time, removes all those afflictions that you may have caught on your travels. Now, there's generally no real limit to the amount of gold or items that you can carry in these games, which makes sense because there's so many spell ingredients. You've got to kind of sometimes choose between items to sort of take at any one location, or drop an existing item if it asks you to do so. And there's a really cool part of this book where you can take an item from book 2, Kare, City Porter Traps, and it gives you access to lots of locations in this book as well. It's a serpent ring. So if you can get that serpent ring in the second book, it gives you a number to deduct from each paragraph when you meet each of these 7 serpents. Now, the serpents are then forced by the power of this ring to give up information that will help you in book 4. So that's a really cool little game mechanic, whereby things you pick up in one book can be used in later books, a bit like Lone Wolf, really, which we'll get to very soon. Now, if you can defeat all 7 serpents, you are given a different paragraph as well to start book 4 from. And it kind of advises you of your notoriety. So, for example, if you're expected, if the Archmage knows you're coming, then you'll take a slightly different path. But if your presence is not expected, you can take another more covert path, if you like, which kind of makes sense. If you stop all the serpents, it's in your interest to do so, then he doesn't know you're coming, you're going to have a lot easier time getting to him, rather than if he's aware of what you're up to. So another vital item for completing this adventure is the whistle, which is used to summon a lift across Lake Ilklala. And again, there is only really one place in this book where you can get it, although it is available in a previous book, I believe, as well. So that's good. This is the adventure sheet, no real change. You've still got your standard attributes, your skill, your stamina, your luck, place for your gold and your treasure, and any provisions that you may have picked up along the way. And of course your equipment and artifacts are going to be quite high at this point. There's going to be a lot of stuff in there that you're carrying over from those previous books. Now the bonus penalties and curses is still there as well, and a place for your clues and any notes. So yeah, standard fare for that that adventure sheet. Now the artwork for this book. John Blanche, like I say, he's back on board. Good old John. He was born in 1948, British fantasy and science fiction illustrator and modeller who worked on the Games Workshop White Dwarf magazine and the Warhammer related games as well. So Blanche was he was the art director for the company, and he illustrated obviously various game books, fighting fantasy publications, and I think for these books there's about 30-ish unique full-page drawings, which is kind of standard fare again, and a number of smaller motifs as well to kind of break up the paragraphs, you know, typical game book style. Now, 2 of the full-page illustrations have clues hidden in them, which is always a good thing, right? Now, they are referred to in the text, not too tricky. So this is one of them here. You can see this is Blanche's illustration, you know, of a series of items you can pick up from this kind of caravan. But against each item is a little description of how much it costs, but of course also the reference number. So then you can move to that reference and have a read about what on earth it is that you're actually thinking about buying. So that's a really nice way of involving the artwork in with the narrative. Now, Blanche's illustrations, a sort of mixture of awesome landscapes, lots of variety in the characters. I really like his style, how everything is slightly off kilter, as it were, how he makes his illustrations almost look like sculptures. So I think this book and this series, you can really say that his artwork is one of the outstanding factors, and something that you always remember about the Sorcery epic. Of course, I've got a favourite picture as always. This is the Death Wraith from reference 12, I think it is. So I'll read it and then you can sort of see where he got his inspiration from. So, you carry on tramping across the plains, watching for signs of life. There are none, but a curious sound in the distance reaches your ears. It gets louder as you continue, a sort of distant screeching, but nowhere is there any likely source of the noise. You look about quizzically and gasp in horror as you see ahead a pair of disembodied eyes glaring at you. Their gaze is hypnotic, but you shake your head to break the spell. The screeching noise is now very close, and as you blink your eyes, you can see its source. 10 yards away, there is a disturbance in the air. A shimmering heat haze is rising from a craggy boulder. And as it rises, so does the pitch of the sound, whatever it has been distorting your view of the landscape ahead. Some way from the rock, the shimmering merges with the eyes, the shrill sound turns into a high-pitched mocking laugh, as if a coven of witches were jeering at you. You stare in fear as you watch the shimmering rises above the eyes, and a fearful shape forms. A dark, cowled creature with a skull-like head beckons you over with a single bony finger. And then, of course, you get a load of options about what you want to do. But yeah, I always thought that stood out, that image, that illustration of the Death Wraith. Okay, let's chat about my likes and dislikes for Seven Serpents. Really love how the items that you can collect in the earlier books play out as you progress through this series, and having an item that enables you to sort of glean knowledge from the serpents that will aid you in books. It's just a reflection on how excellent game design and planning this is. You know, what a great job Mr. Jackson did. His foresight for these books is second to none. I also like how the more serpents you engage, the more benefits you reap at the end. So it's worth tracking down as many of these serpents as you possibly can. Each serpent is different enough, makes you think about, you know, different ways of how to defeat them. They each have their weaknesses. And each serpent has like a clue, you know, scattered throughout the journey. Each serpent has a clue that will give you some idea about how to best it. And also, I really like how the artwork plays a role in the adventure. So there's twice, like I mentioned earlier, with that caravan of items, but also, I think that's on reference 315, but also on 410, where there's a clue written in this scroll, which is this image here. There's not too much to dislike for this adventure, to be honest with you. Some say that it feels like it's the weakest entry, that it's more of a sort of bland trek across wasteland with only the serpents to kind of break up monotony. But I don't mind that. I think there's enough going on before you reach the forest and the lake to kind of keep you interested. All in all, I think it's another strong entry with more likes than dislikes. So, fun facts for this book. The iOS-Android conversion of the book, and the previous ones, of course, was produced by Inkle Studios, and I think it was released in 2014, so it's been around a while, and they get a lot of hype, actually. They're quite close to the source material, so they did a good job, did their homework. The Sorcery series originally began publication under the main Penguin Books brand, rather than Puffin imprint. Now, in the UK, it was therefore never published by Penguin, but in the US, it was published by Penguin. So that's kind of a strange thing, considering it was always owned by Puffin. You know, they were always the ones, the publishers. But yeah, they had the same cover and illustration. So instead, Penguin continued with the coloured number format in the US for the Sorcery series, like that very first cover that I showed you, with this book having the, you know, that number 3 in that little blue triangle in the top right-hand corner. Okay, so errors for this book. There's a couple, not too bad. It's possible to obtain a small vial of gas from Dintainta to aid against the sleepless ram. Now, upon reaching Mampang, that vial of gas, has become a small vial of liquid. So something happened there. Yeah, you can get stuck on the shore also of Lake Ilklala. And if you don't know how to summon the ferryman, remember that whistle? So yet not be able to call on Libra either for assistance if you haven't called on her before, which I always thought was a little bit harsh. But also at that lake, there's a missing stamina gain when you go for a little sleep. So you'd think you would get some stamina back, but no, not this time. Also, if you use a weapon against that death wraith, that picture I showed you, my fave picture, on reference 32, after reducing its stamina to 3 or less, you are given the option to finishing it off or sparing it on reference 205. However, if you use the mag spell, which you're entitled to do against it on reference 452, you are given the same option but without specifying how many stamina points it has, which I thought was a little bit odd, a bit confusing. There's also a bit of confusion over the colour of the Serpent of Fire. Is it red, as referenced in 117, or is it yellow, as referenced in 148? Yeah, so that's more or less it. There was one other thing, on reference 347, I think it is. It doesn't indicate whether the yellow powder, which is an item you can pick up like a spell ingredient, it doesn't indicate whether it's used up by casting your spell. But in reference 466, it implies that you keep some of it. However, in the illustration that goes with it, for the spell, it shows a discarded vial of powder. So who knows? But anyway, let's do a summary and a score for this third entry in the Sorcery series. So part 3. This is an epic book in many ways. It's got a lot going on. You have the 7 Serpents, obviously, to dispatch. You need to discover their weaknesses as well, learn from them their secrets, because of course when you get each one, you can learn a secret from them that will help you in book 4. And then you've got to send them to meet their maker. So there's a lot to do. Their secrets can be really useful, like I say, in that final book. So it's worth getting hold of them. There are many spell ingredients to be collected. There's loads of magical weapons to be used, lots of items to be picked up. And a lot of these items, you know, that you picked up in earlier books will come to fruition, which is a great thing. as you would expect, there is a perfect path to meet each of these serpents, but of course you don't need to stop all of them to beat the book. However, it is in your interest, like I say, to do so. And the reason for that is on 393. So reference 393, it kind of tells you a bit about some of the goodies that you can get. So for example, if you don't beat any serpents, 496 will say, all 7 serpents are now winging their way to the Archduke's fortress to warn him of your arrival. Preparations will be made to ensure that you do not reach your goal. Although you have survived the long journey across Kakabad, many perils await you at Mampang. Because of this, you must deduct 2 skill, 2 stamina, and 3 luck. But if you can stop them all, and there is a reference for each serpent, so it gets progressively better, the more you stop. But if you can stop all 7, 357 says, you have defeated the 7 serpents. You are indeed a worthy champ of Analand. Your success now means that you may continue your journey to the fortress of Mampang unannounced. That's the main point. The Archmage will not have been warned of your arrival or your mission. In view of this, you may start the next chapter in the Crown of Kings as reference 237 instead of 1. You may also increase your skill by 2 points, and that's above your initial. The stamina can be restored to its initial. You may increase your initial luck by 1 point and restore any luck to this new level. So it's worth doing, and that reference they give you, rather than 1, kind of tells you that, as you work through the book, whenever you bump into people, depending on whether or not you're referred to as the Analander or not, will determine which way you'll go. And you'll get I think it's minus a certain amount of references from the reference you're on if you are there unknown or unexpected. So, and you'll get a whole different story, which is a really cool little game mechanic. Right, so it's a rich adventure one across the backlands before entering Sonata Forest and then crossing Lake Ilklala. So there's lots to do in this gamebook. The battles with the serpents are really well designed and described as well, making you really think about, how best to defeat them. And knowing their vulnerabilities really helps, but they can be beaten without this knowledge. You can just draw your sword and whack 'em one. As you carry on across all that you gained from your previous books, you may find that your item list and your equipment is quite extensive at this point. And however, there's no carry limit, so it's not an issue. But it does give you some interesting thoughts about, the image of you traipsing all over the backlands, laden down with all this junk you're carrying. There are some interesting magical weapons that items, alike, that are given a chance to shine in this adventure that you may have picked up earlier. So that there's Chakram, where you can perform a skill roll to inflict 2 additional damage on the enemy. You've got the Lucky Talisman, where you never minus a luck point if you're unlucky, when you perform your luck test. And there's that Chain Mail as well that you picked up earlier, whereby if you're hit, you roll a die, and on a 5 or 6, you only get 1 stamina damage. So that's quite cool. So there's lots of variety, lots of cool equipment. Seven Serpents provides lots of spell casting opportunities, as you would imagine. So if you chose the wizard player, lots of encounters. But if you chose obviously the warrior character, then just lots of battles instead. So yeah, it's a good balance still. The artwork throughout is tip top, but strangely, book 3 and 4 revert back to original Blanche illustrations for the Scholastic series. Whereas before you had that kind of computer-generated clip art look for book 1 and 2. But with Scholastic, for 3 and 4, they reverted back to Blanche's artwork. I don't know why they didn't keep Blanche throughout, but if you know, comment. There's also characters that you will meet and allies to befriend, like Shadrach and Fenstra, that will make an appearance in the final book as well, so keep an eye out for them. There are so many tie-ins that it does earn Jackson that kind of respect, in the planning and construction of this game book series. The book features a kind of sandbox feel to it, kind of sandbox style. It's more than just open world, kind of allowing you to map the backlands quite freely rather than following that strict path. The main goal is to locate and destroy those 7 unique serpents, of course, each with specific weaknesses. Defeating them will help you in that later book. The entry is considered much harder than the previous ones. It requires gathering a lot of information and mastering that spell system to survive. The writing is highly immersive and with lots of detail, describing the surroundings, lots of unique encounters, and it makes for quite a memorable book. And while some fans found the vast kind of open nature a bit overwhelming or overly punishing, it is generally praised as a creative and essential chapter in this Sorcery series, providing a good mix of puzzles and combat. So, if you sum all that up, I would give it a 7 out of 10 for the Seven Serpents. Right, a shout out. Yeah, so I mentioned David Valesco and Rick Soul. So this is an exciting time to be into game books because I think it was February 3rd, so at the time of this review, which is March of 26, back in February, just gone, we have New Tokyo 2130, which is kind of like a cyberpunk epic game book. And I do mean epic. It's 5 volumes. Okay, 5 books, 1 game book. So that's how epic it is. So that's kind of unique. I mean, we're all used to flipping through the book, you know, flipping through the references. Well, in this you do the same, but you also flip through books because it's that vast. So 5 volumes. It took them like 3 years to write it between them. You can play as this samurai kind of bounty hunter type character, and it's set after World War IV, so Earth is probably not in the best of shape, and you've got to earn 1 million imperial yen to leave Earth and go to Mars to live out the rest of your life. And to do that, you've got like 100 missions available to you, each giving you a certain amount of money, but you only have to do 50. You've got to complete 50 missions. That's kind of like your time limit, 50 missions to raise that money. A really great concept, really great idea. I'll put a couple of links in the description to each of those authors. You've got to check this out. It is like nothing else. I mean, I'm currently reading Rise of the Ancients, which I'll also review at some point. And I thought that was epic, but that is small fry compared to this. This is something special. So check it out. I'll also put in a link to someone I did a shout out a while ago, Gamebook Reviews. I'll put a link in for him, because without him, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have known about this New Tokyo 2130. I kind of found it through his site. That's my review of the Seven Serpents. I hope you liked it. If you did, put some comments in there about what you thought about this book, whether you liked it, whether you thought it was linear, whether you thought it was a good sandbox attempt from Mr. Jackson, what your thoughts of the artwork and whatnot. And maybe share out the site. The next book I'm going to review is, of course, the 4th and final book, Crown of Kings, to bring this series to an end. So, catch you in that review.